David worked for 34 years as a hospital administrator in a mid-sized city in the Southwest. He was good at his job, really good. He managed budgets, led teams, solved problems before most people even saw the problems. He was the person everyone called when things went sideways. In his department, people knew his name. His opinion really carried weight. His calendar was always full. He retired at 63. He planned it. He was financially sound. His wife was thrilled. The kids threw him a party. And within 4 months, he had told me, and I'm paraphrasing here, that he really felt like a ghost in his own life. Here is what was happening to David, broken down in a simple way. His entire sense of self had been built around what he did, his job. Not who he was, but what he did, his title, his role, his usefulness to other people. For 34 years, those things were the same thing. When the role ended, he didn't know which part of himself was left. And that's what occupational wellness is the problem. Not a financial one, not a health one. The dimension of his life that gives him a sense of purpose, direction, contribution had collapsed and gone away. He had no framework for rebuilding it, and no one had talked to him about it. But it did not stop there. Within the first few weeks of retirement, David noticed something else. The people he talked to every day, the nurses, the department heads, administrators, well, they were gone too with the job. Not because anything had gone wrong, just because this is how it works. You leave the building, and the relationships that lived inside of it largely stay there. His social world had been built, without him realizing it, almost entirely around his professional identity. He had lunches with colleagues, after-work conversations. The informal community of shared mission helped, and when the job ended, so did most of all of that. His wife noticed he was home more, but somehow he seemed more lonely. He started declining invitations, small ones at first, then larger ones. It was just easier than explaining how he felt. And that brings us to the third piece. David was not depressed in a clinical sense, but he was not okay either. He felt irritable in ways he couldn't explain. He snapped at his wife over small things and felt terrible after. He lay awake some nights running through mental lists of everything he should be grateful for, which somehow even made it worse. He knew something was wrong. He just couldn't name it or explain it. And because he couldn't do that, he could not really fix it. That's a very specific and very common place to be. You're aware enough to know something's wrong or off, but not yet clear enough on what it is so that you can do anything about it. David felt stuck, not in his circumstances, but in his own readiness to change them. About 4 months into retirement, David did something small that turned out to actually matter a lot. He took an honest look at his life. Not his finances, not his health numbers, but the full picture. He asked himself, in 8 different areas of wellness, how things were actually going. Not just I'm okay, which is too easy, but specifically, am I contributing to anything might be the question. Do I feel like myself? Am I connected to others, people who actually know me? Do I have a sense of where I'm going? Those are the real questions. Once he did that, the fog started to lift a little, because he stopped trying to fix some vague feeling and started looking at specific dimensions of his life. And he could see clearly that 3 of them had taken significant hits from going into retirement: his occupational, social, and emotional dimensions, while others, like his physical health and financial, were actually pretty good or fine. And that matters because it told him where to focus. It told him this was not an everything is broken problem. It was a specific, identifiable gap in a specific part of his life. That's the difference between I don't know what's wrong, which is what he was feeling, and I know what I'm working on now. He was not ready, and readiness really matters, to act yet, but he was getting ready to get ready, so to speak. And that's a real step, one that a lot of people skip because they're waiting just to feel motivated before they move, when often you need to have that movement first before the motivation shows up. David started with an occupational wellness dimension because that was the loudest gap. He made a list of what he had actually been good at his career. Not his job title, but the underlying skills. Things like problem solving, systems thinking, mentoring younger staff, building consensus in rooms where people often disagreed. Then he asked a different question. Where do those things still need doing? He decided to reach out to a small nonprofit hospital foundation in his area, and he offered to serve on their advisory board. Not because it paid, not because it was prestigious, because it really gave him a room to walk into where his experience and skills meant something. He also started meeting monthly with 2 younger administrators. They had reached out to him over the years. These were informal meetings, coffee conversations. He had put it off for 2 or 3 years now. He stopped putting it off. He became a mentor. The social piece followed naturally from the occupational piece, which is exactly how these dimensions work. It's known as interaction. Progress in one creates movement in others. You can't be surprised by that. As he re-engaged with meaningful work, he had things to talk about again. He had a context for these conversations beyond just how was your weekend or how are you doing. He reconnected with 2 colleagues he had let drift. He and his wife started a Sunday dinner tradition with another retired couple they had always meant to spend more time with. The emotional shift was a little slower, but it came. David started journaling, not because someone really told him to, or because he felt like he should, but because he had started using a structured reflection tool. And that asked him specific questions each week. Not, how do you feel, but something like, what contributed to your wellness this week? What dimension needs more attention? It gave his self-reflection a direction. Within a few weeks, he noticed he was sleeping better. His irritability was dropping, not because his life had dramatically changed, but because he had named what it was that was wrong, and he started moving toward something. So about 6 months after that low point, David described his week to me again. Monday, he had an advisory board call. Tuesday, he met with a former colleague for lunch, and that was the first time in over a year. Wednesday, he spent the morning working on a proposal that the foundation had asked him to lead. Thursday, he and his wife drove out to see the grandchildren. And then Friday, he did nothing scheduled and didn't feel guilty about it. Now, that's not a perfect life, but it's a life with structure that he built intentionally. It was his. Purpose that he chose, the connection that he maintained. He was in charge. The career was over, but David was not. What changed for David was not his circumstances, they stayed the same. It was his clarity. He went from knowing something felt wrong to understanding what it really was, to taking specific action in specific dimensions, one step at a time in the right direction. That's the arc that Change 8 is designed to support. If any of David's story sounds familiar, that is worth paying attention to. Not because something's broken, because awareness is where the change begins. The first step I would recommend is the Retirement Wellness Quick Check from Change 8. It takes about 3 minutes. It looks at all 8 dimensions of your wellness and gives you a quick snapshot of where you actually stand. Not where you think you should be, but where you are right now. The link for the quick check is in the description. And if you want to go deeper, if you want a community of people navigating this same transition and access to the tools and frameworks that helped David get unstuck, the Change 8 community on School is free to join. Love to have you there. That link is also in the description. David's story is a composite drawn from real conversations with real people in retirement transition. The pattern is real, the dimensions are real, and the pathway through them is what Change 8 is all about. I'll see you in the next video. Retire well and live fully.